Ethan Carter wiped the sweat off his forehead as he adjusted his sun visor. The twin suns of Kepler 186f were setting, casting a deep orange glow over the rocky plains. His small farm, if one could call it that, stood alone in this unforgiving land. He had built it himself, piece by piece, after arriving on this planet 5 years ago. Life here was tough, but he had learned to survive. His crops, though stubborn, grew well enough to keep him fed. His water supply, collected from underground reservoirs, was just enough to last. The isolation never bothered him much. In fact, he preferred it that way. But tonight, something felt different. As he walked along the perimeter of his land, checking his motion sensors, a flashing red light caught his attention. One of his outer alarms had been triggered. He reached for his rifle, a reliable old thing from Earth's colonial days, and cautiously moved toward the source. What he found made him freeze. 2 figures lay motionless near the edge of his farm. They weren't human. Ethan had encountered aliens before, traders, explorers, even a few settlers. But these 2 were unlike any he had seen. Their skin was a smooth shade of violet, their hair long and silvery. They were dressed in torn, dark suits, clearly damaged. One of them, slightly taller, with a scar along her forehead, was breathing heavily. The other, a younger-looking one, barely moved at all. He hesitated. Strangers meant trouble. That was a rule he had learned long ago. But they were in bad shape, and he wasn't the kind of man to leave someone to die. With a sigh, he slung his rifle over his back and knelt beside them. "Hey," he said, keeping his voice calm but firm. "Can you hear me?" The taller one stirred, her glowing golden eyes fluttering open. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak. Help. That was all Ethan needed to hear. He lifted the younger one first, lighter than he expected, and then helped the other to her feet. They barely had the strength to stand, so he half-carried them back to his cabin. His mind raced with questions. Who were they? Where had they come from? And why were they here, of all places? Once inside, he set them down on a makeshift bed in the corner. His home was small, built for one, but he had spare blankets and a working heater. He grabbed his medical kit and a flask of water. "Drink," he said, handing the flask to the older one. She hesitated, then took a sip, her eyes watching him carefully. "You're human," she whispered. "Last time I checked," Ethan replied. "Who are you?" She looked at her companion, then back at him. "My name is Scifi," she said. "This is my sister, Vela." Ethan studied them both. Scifi had an air of strength despite her exhaustion. Vela, on the other hand, was barely conscious. "What happened to you?" he asked. Scifi hesitated. "Our ship, it crashed. We've been walking for days. No food, no water." That explained their condition. Ethan stood up and went to his small kitchen. He didn't have much, but he wasn't about to let them starve. He heated some nutrient soup, a simple but filling meal, and brought it over. Scifi took a cautious sniff before tasting it. Her eyes widened in surprise. "This is good," she said, taking another sip. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "It's just basic rations." But Scifi ignored him, eating eagerly. He handed a bowl to Vela, who weakly sipped before her body relaxed, as if the food was the most satisfying thing she had ever tasted. Ethan frowned. Something about their reaction felt strange. After a few minutes, Scifi looked at him again. "Thank you." Ethan shrugged. "Just doing what any decent person would do." Scifi shook her head. "No, not many would help strangers like this." Ethan didn't argue. Maybe she was right. As the night deepened, Vela fell into a peaceful sleep, and Scifi leaned against the wall, her strength slowly returning. Ethan sat in his chair, watching them, his mind still full of questions. Something told him that these 2 sisters weren't just lost travelers. There was more to their story. And whether he liked it or not, he was now a part of it. Ethan Carter woke up early, as he always did. Life on Thi, Lonely Planet followed a strict routine. Check the crops, repair any damage from the night's winds, and keep an eye on his perimeter alarms. But today was different. Today, he had two unexpected guests. He glanced toward the corner of his cabin. The two alien sisters, Sira and Vela, were still there. Vela was curled under the blanket, her breathing steady, while Sira sat up, watching him with sharp golden eyes. "You didn't sleep," Ethan noted as he poured himself a cup of coffee. Sira shook her head. "I was thinking." Ethan sat across from her, sipping his drink. "About what?" Sira hesitated before speaking. "Why you helped us. Most species in the galaxy wouldn't bother." Ethan shrugged. "Guess humans are different." She gave a small smile. "Yes, you are." Before Ethan could respond, a sound came from the bed. Vela stirred, her eyes blinking open. She groaned softly as she tried to sit up. "Easy," Ethan said. "You were in bad shape last night." Vela looked around, confused for a moment. Then her gaze settled on her sister. "Sira." "I'm here," Sira reassured her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Ethan walked to the kitchen. "You both need food." He grabbed another bowl of the nutrient soup he had made the night before. He had plenty of supplies, but he'd have to be careful if they stayed long. When he handed the bowl to Vela, she took it with shaky hands. The moment she tasted it, her eyes widened, just like Sarah's had the night before. "This is incredible," she whispered, eating faster. Ethan frowned. "It's just soup." Sarah watched her sister closely, then turned to Ethan. "Human food. It's different." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Different how?" Sarah hesitated. "We come from a species that relies on specific nutrients to survive. Most food in the galaxy does little for us. But this," she gestured toward the bowl, "this is making us stronger. Faster." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me human food is some kind of super fuel for you?" Sira nodded. "We've never eaten anything like it before." Ethan wasn't sure if he believed that, but as he watched, he noticed something strange. Vela, who had barely been able to lift her head last night, now looked better. Her skin had a healthier glow, and her hands no longer trembled. Even Sira, who had seemed exhausted, looked more alert than before. "You weren't kidding," Ethan muttered. Sira met his gaze. "We owe you our lives." Ethan waved a hand. "Just eat. You'll need your strength." The sisters continued their meal, and Ethan returned to his usual work. He stepped outside, checking his sensors. The sky was clear, and the land stretched endlessly in every direction. His farm was isolated, hidden from the rest of the galaxy. That was why he had chosen this place. But now he wasn't so sure it was hidden. "You look worried," she said. "Because I am," Ethan replied. "There's a signal coming from orbit, someone scanning this planet." Sira and Vela exchanged a glance. It was a silent conversation, but Ethan understood what it meant. "You knew this would happen," he said. Sira sighed. "We were hoping to avoid it." "Start talking," Ethan demanded. "Who's after you?" Vela, still looking a little weak but much stronger than before, finally spoke. "The Varlek Empire." Ethan had heard of them. A ruthless, warlike alien faction known for hunting down those who opposed them. "We are not just travelers," Sira admitted. "We are the last survivors of our royal family. Our homeworld was overthrown in a coup. The Varlek took everything. We escaped, but they won't stop hunting us." Ethan exhaled slowly. This was bad. He had wanted a quiet life, away from the politics of the galaxy. Now he was harboring two fugitives, ones that a dangerous empire wanted dead. "And you brought them here?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but firm. Sira looked at him with a steady gaze. "We didn't have a choice. Our ship was failing. This planet was the closest safe place." "Not so safe anymore," Ethan muttered. A sudden beeping sound interrupted them. Ethan checked his monitor. The signal from orbit was getting stronger. "They found us," he said. Vela's breathing quickened. "How long before they land?" "Maybe a few hours, maybe less," Ethan said. "Depends if they're just scouting, or if they already know you're here." Sira stood up. "We have to leave." Ethan shook his head. "Nowhere to go. If they've locked onto this place, they'll track you anywhere." "Then what do we do?" Vela asked. Ethan looked at them both. He had spent years preparing for trouble, but he never expected to be fighting off an alien strike force. He could abandon them, save himself. But that wasn't the kind of man he was. "We fight," Ethan said. Sira and Vela stared at him. "You would do that for us?" Ethan gave a small smirk. "I already fed you. Might as well keep you alive." Sira chuckled, shaking her head. "Humans really are different." Ethan moved quickly, grabbing his old Earth military rifle from the storage unit under his floor. He had a few old defense systems set up around the farm, turret drones, motion sensors, and a reinforced bunker. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "We need to be ready," Ethan said, checking his rifle. "If they come, we make them regret it." Vela stood up, her strength returning. "Then let's fight." Outside, the sky darkened as a shadow appeared in the clouds. The enemy had arrived. The first sign of the enemy's arrival was the deep rumble in the sky. Ethan Carter looked up and saw a black, sleek warship descending through the thick clouds. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a small freighter, but he knew better than to underestimate it. Ships like that carried strike teams, soldiers trained to eliminate targets quickly and efficiently. "They're coming," he muttered. Sira and Vela stood beside him, their golden eyes locked on the ship. "How many do you think?" Sira asked. "Doesn't matter," Ethan said, tightening his grip on his rifle. "We're not letting them take you." He had spent years building this farm, making it a fortress of survival in a hostile world. Now, for the first time, he was going to use it. Ethan turned to the sisters. "We have less than an hour before they land. We need to prepare." Vela, still recovering but growing stronger, stepped forward. "Tell us what to do." Ethan nodded. "All right, listen carefully." Turning the farm into a battlefield. Ethan moved quickly, guiding Sira and Vela through his small but well-protected homestead. He activated the turret drones, small, spherical robots hidden around his farm. They floated into the air, scanning for movement. He set up electronic traps, shock mines, and flash grenades that would disorient anyone who stepped too close. He reinforced the bunker hatch, just in case they needed a last stand. Sira and Vela helped where they could, learning fast. Vela, despite her weakened state, proved to be quick with her hands, assembling barriers for scrap metal. Sira, on the other hand, had a sharp tactical mind. She studied Ethan's defenses and pointed out weak spots he hadn't considered. "Move that turret closer," she suggested. "It'll cover the blind spot near the east fence." Ethan raised an eyebrow, but followed her advice. She wasn't just any royal fugitive. She had military training. "Not bad," Ethan said. Sira smirked. "You'll see, human. We don't go down easily." The enemy approaches. The warship hovered just outside the farm's perimeter, its engines humming like a predator waiting to strike. A hatch hissed open, and figures dropped down onto the dry, rocky ground. Ethan zoomed in with his binoculars. 5. No, 6 of them, he muttered. They were Varlak soldiers, wearing black armor and carrying plasma rifles. They moved in perfect formation, sweeping toward the farm with deadly precision. These weren't just bounty hunters. They sent professionals, Vela whispered. Ethan clenched his jaw. "Good. Makes it more fun." Sira gave him a strange look. "You enjoy this?" Ethan smirked. "Not really. But if we're fighting, we win." He lifted his rifle and took aim. The first shots fired. The moment the Varlak soldiers stepped into the farm's perimeter, Ethan pulled the trigger. Crack! The shot hit the lead soldier's helmet, sending him crashing to the ground. The others scattered, immediately returning fire. Blue plasma bolts zipped through the air, striking the metal barricades. The turret drones activated, unleashing a hail of bullets. One soldier tried to sneak around the side, but stepped on a shock mine. A blinding flash exploded, sending him sprawling. Sira grabbed a weapon from Ethan's stash, an old but powerful pulse pistol. She took 2 precise shots, hitting another enemy square in the chest. Vila, still weak but determined, used the cover of smoke to move closer. She grabbed a fallen enemy's weapon and fired back. The farm, once a peaceful home, had become a battlefield. The final push. The remaining 3 Varlak soldiers regrouped, realizing they had underestimated their targets. They switched tactics, using cover and moving in carefully. One of them threw a plasma grenade toward Ethan's position. "Move," Ethan shouted, grabbing Sira and pulling her down as the grenade exploded, shaking the ground. Dirt and smoke filled the air. When the dust cleared, one of the soldiers rushed forward, charging straight at Ethan with a plasma blade. Ethan barely had time to react. He dodged, but the blade sliced his shoulder, burning through his jacket. Gritting his teeth, he spun and slammed the butt of his rifle into the enemy's helmet, knocking him back. Sira took the opening, a single shot to the head. The soldier dropped. Only 2 enemies remained. Vila, breathing heavily, aimed her stolen rifle. "This ends now." She fired twice. The plasma shots struck true, and the last 2 soldiers fell. Silence. Only the sound of the warship's engines remained. Ethan stood up, wiping the blood from his arm. "We did it." Sira checked the bodies. "They're all down." Vila, exhausted but victorious, looked toward the sky. "But their ship is still up there." Ethan followed her gaze. The Varlak ship wasn't leaving. "They know we're here now," Ethan said grimly. "They'll send more." Sira nodded. "Then we have to be ready." Ethan reloaded his rifle. He had wanted a quiet life. But now it was worthy battlefield was silent. Smoke rose from the fallen Varlak soldiers, their black armor scorched from the fight. The scent of burnt metal and plasma lingered in the air. Ethan Carter stood in the middle of it all, gripping his rifle tightly. His shoulder throbbed from the wound, but he ignored the pain. Sira and Vela stood beside him, breathing heavily. Their golden eyes burned with determination. They had survived the first attack, but this wasn't over. Ethan looked up at the sky. The Varlak warship still hovered above, its dark shape barely visible through the clouds. It hadn't left. "They're watching us," Sira muttered. Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow. "No, they're waiting." Vela frowned. "For what?" Ethan sighed. "Reinforcements." Sira clenched her fists. "They won't stop until we're dead." "Then we don't let them stop us," Ethan said, securing the farm. They had little time before the next wave arrived. Ethan quickly began reinforcing the farm's defenses. He collected weapons and ammunition from the fallen Varlak soldiers. Their plasma rifles were advanced, and they would need every advantage they could get. He repaired the turret drones, reloading them and adjusting their positions for better coverage. He set up additional shock mines along the perimeter, ensuring that any enemy who tried sneaking in would regret it. Sira worked beside him, her sharp tactical mind proving invaluable. "You should reposition the barricades," she suggested. "We need firing lanes." Ethan nodded, moving the barriers. He wasn't used to taking orders, but she knew what she was doing. Meanwhile, Vela tested one of the plasma rifles. She had been weak before, but now she looked stronger than ever. Ethan noticed it. "You're healing fast," he said. Vela flexed her fingers. "It's your food," she admitted. "It's doing something to us. We're stronger than before." Ethan filed that information away for later. Right now, survival was the priority. A message from the enemy. As they finished setting up defenses, the Varlak warship suddenly moved. It hovered lower, close enough that they could see its underbelly. Then, a holographic projection appeared in the sky. A Varlak commander stood there, his tall, armored form glowing in blue light. His face was hidden behind a metal mask, but his voice was cold and sharp. "Human, you have interfered in Varlak affairs." Ethan smirked. "Nice to meet you too." The commander ignored him. "Surrender the fugitives, and we will let you live." Ethan crossed his arms. "Yeah, I don't believe you." The commander tilted his head. "Refuse, and we will burn your land. There will be no escape." Sira stepped forward. "You slaughtered our people. Do you think we would ever surrender?" The commander remained silent for a moment. Then his voice turned amused. "You do not understand, princess," he said. "We are not here for you anymore." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Then why are you here?" The commander's mask seemed to shift, as if he were smiling beneath it. "We want the human." The truth revealed. Ethan stiffened. "Me?" The commander nodded. "We have studied your kind. We know what you are." Sira and Vela exchanged worried glances. Ethan kept his face unreadable, but inside, he was on high alert. The commander continued. "Your food, your biology, it is unique. The sister's strength proves it. Your species is an anomaly." Ethan remained silent, his grip tightening on his rifle. "We no longer wish to simply kill you," the commander said. "We wish to study you." Ethan let out a short laugh. "Yeah, that's not happening." The commander sighed. "Very well. Then we will take you by force." The hologram vanished, and the warship's weapons powered up. The next wave was coming. And this time, it wasn't just a strike team. It was an army. A last stand begins. Ethan turned to Sira and Vela. "Looks like I'm more popular than I thought." Sira's expression was serious. "If they take you, they'll never let you go." "Then we make sure they don't take me," Ethan said. Vela stepped beside him. "We stand together." The warship's doors opened, and drop pods began falling toward the farm. Ethan checked his rifle one last time. "Hope you two are ready." Sira smirked. "Always." The first explosions hit the ground, shaking the earth beneath them. Ethan took a deep breath. Then, as the enemy landed, he opened fire. The war for survival had truly begun. The ground shook as the Varlak drop pods crashed into the dirt, sending dust and debris into the air. The warship above rumbled, its massive engines glowing red. Ethan Carter narrowed his eyes, gripping his rifle as the doors of the pods hissed open. From inside, rows of armored soldiers emerged, their black helmets reflecting the burning sky. Unlike the first wave, these weren't just hunters. They were warriors trained for large-scale combat. Each carried a plasma rifle, their movements precise and disciplined. Ethan exhaled slowly. This was it. Behind him, Sira and Vela stood ready for war. "They outnumber us," Vela said, gripping her stolen plasma weapon. Sira, standing beside her, smirked. "That just means more targets." Ethan chuckled. "I like the way you think." The first strike. Before the enemy could organize, Ethan took the first shot. His rifle cracked, and one of the Varlak soldiers dropped. Instantly, the others reacted, returning fire with blazing blue plasma bolts. Ethan died behind a metal barricade as plasma burned through the air, leaving scorch marks on the ground. "Turrets, online," he shouted. The hidden defense drones activated, their rotating barrels unleashing a storm of bullets. The Varlak soldiers scattered, some diving for cover, others falling in the crossfire. Sira and Vela moved swiftly. Sira raised her pulse pistol, taking precise shots, each blast hitting its mark. Vela, moving with newfound strength, fired her plasma rifle, forcing the enemy back. She had once been weak, but now she fought like a warrior. Ethan grinned. "Not bad, princesses." Sira smirked. "Keep up, human. The enemy adapts." The Varlak commander, still watching from the warship, adjusted his strategy. The remaining soldiers stopped firing blindly and instead moved in careful, coordinated groups. "Brace yourselves," Ethan warned. "They're getting serious." The Varlak troops launched grenades, small glowing spheres that hummed with energy. The moment they hit the ground, boom! A powerful shockwave sent Ethan and the sisters flying back. His ears rang as he hit the ground, the force knocking the air from his lungs. Sira groaned, pushing herself up. "They're trying to break our line." Through the smoke, Ethan saw 3 enemy soldiers rushing in, their plasma blades ignited. Too close for guns. Ethan rolled aside just as a blade slashed down, burning through the ground where he had just been. He grabbed his combat knife, barely blocking another strike before kicking his attacker back. Sira dodged another, her movements fast and fluid. She sidestepped a strike and blasted the enemy at close range, the plasma bolt punching through armor. Vila, using her newfound speed, dodged an attack and spun behind her opponent, stabbing him with a plasma blade she had taken from a fallen soldier. The last Varlak warrior tried to retreat. Crack! Ethan shot him in the back. The smoke cleared, revealing the remaining soldiers hesitating. The 3 of them, a human and 2 alien princesses, had taken down half their forces. But the fight wasn't over yet. The final assault. Above them, the Varlak warship's engines roared. The commander had had enough. A new wave of drop pods rained from the sky. But this time, they weren't just soldiers. They were battle droids, heavily armored machines with rapid-fire cannons. Ethan cursed. "That's new." Sira gritted her teeth. "We can't hold forever." Vila looked at Ethan. "We need an escape plan." Ethan fought fast. His farm had been built for defense, but now it was a death trap. They needed to get away before the next wave overwhelmed them. Then he remembered something. "The old freighter," he muttered. Sira blinked. "What?" Ethan grabbed his communicator, flipping through signals. "I have an old cargo freighter hidden in the back of the farm. It still flies." Vela's eyes widened. "You never mentioned that." "You never asked," Ethan replied with a grin. Sira nodded. "Then let's go. Now." But the enemy wasn't going to let them escape easily. The battle droids opened fire, their cannons tearing through barricades. Ethan covered Sira and Vela as they ran, taking out 2 droids with carefully placed shots. Sira hacked into one of the turret drones, redirecting its fire onto the enemy. Vela, using her enhanced speed, outmaneuvered the droids, blasting their weak spots. But the Varlak warship was preparing to land, and once it did, there would be no escape. "We have to hurry," Ethan shouted. The freighter was old, rusted, and barely functioning, but it was their only hope. Ethan sprinted toward it, sliding inside the cockpit. "Come on, baby, don't fail me now," he muttered, flipping the ignition. The engine sputtered, coughing out black smoke. Sira and Vela jumped in behind him. Outside, the Varlak commander stepped off his ship, watching them with cold eyes. "Stop them," he ordered. The battle droids advanced, firing everything they had. Ethan slammed the controls. The freighter's engines roared to life, lifting off the ground just as plasma fire exploded around them. "We're flying," Vela gasped. "Not yet," Ethan growled, fighting to gain altitude. The freighter shook violently. The Varlak warship locked onto them, preparing to blast them from the sky. Sira pointed at the controls. "Ethan, the hyperdrive." Ethan grinned. Already on it. The engines overloaded, the ship shuddered, and then, with a final burst of energy, the freighter jumped into hyperspace, leaving the planet behind. A new fight ahead. Ethan leaned back in his seat, breathing hard. They had escaped, but this wasn't over. The Varlak Empire now knew what he was. They wouldn't stop hunting him. Sira looked at him. "You saved us again, Ethan Carter." Ethan smirked. "Yeah, well, let's just hope I don't regret it." Vela, staring at the stars outside, whispered, "Where do we go now?" Ethan exhaled. Wherever the fight takes us. The stars stretched into endless streaks of light as the old freighter shot through hyperspace. Inside the cockpit, Ethan Carter sat in the pilot's seat, gripping the controls tightly. His hands were still shaking from the battle they had barely escaped. Behind him, Sira and Vela were quiet, their golden eyes reflecting the glow of the ship's control panels. They had won, for now. But the fight wasn't over. Ethan exhaled. "We made it." Sira nodded. "For now." Vela frowned. "But they won't stop hunting us." Ethan knew she was right. The Varlek Empire had marked him as a target. They had called him an anomaly, something valuable. They wouldn't just let him go. He clenched his jaw. "Then we stop running." Sira raised an eyebrow. "And what do you suggest, human?" Ethan smirked. "We take the fight to them. A plan for war." The freighter wasn't built for combat. But Ethan had a plan. "We need allies," he said. "There are others out there who hate the Varlek as much as we do. If we can find them, we can fight back." Sira crossed her arms. "You want to start a rebellion?" Ethan shrugged. "Something like that." Vela's eyes lit up. "There is a place, a hidden world where my father's forces once gathered." Ethan leaned forward. "You're saying there's an army out there?" Sira nodded slowly. "Not an army, but warriors, survivors, and they hate the Varlek even more than we do." Ethan grinned. "Then that's where we're going." He turned to the ship's navigation system and entered new coordinates. "Hold on," he said. "We're not done yet." A dangerous arrival. Hours later, the freighter dropped out of hyperspace, appearing near a dark, hidden moon orbiting a dying star. The planet below was covered in thick clouds, and its surface was dotted with abandoned ruins. Vela pointed. "Down there." Ethan guided the ship through the thick atmosphere, dodging floating debris and old wreckage. As they descended, the sensors picked up several ships approaching. Sira tensed. "We have company." Ethan checked the screen. Not Varlek. Before he could say more, the ship's communicator crackled to life. "Unidentified vessel, state your purpose." Ethan picked up the comm. "We're looking for allies." There was a long pause. Then, "Land at the coordinates we're sending, and don't try anything stupid." Ethan smirked. "Wouldn't dream of it." The gathering of rebels. The ship landed in a hidden base, deep inside a massive underground cavern. As the doors opened, a group of armed fighters surrounded them, weapons raised. Ethan stepped forward, hands raised. "Easy, now. We're on your side." A tall warrior, covered in scarred armor, stepped forward. His reptilian eyes studied Ethan carefully. "You're human," he said. Ethan nodded. "Yeah. And I'm guessing you don't like the Varlek either." The warrior let out a low growl. "They destroyed our worlds. We have waited for a chance to strike back." Sira stepped beside Ethan. "That chance is now." The warriors exchanged glances. Then their leader grinned. "Then welcome to the rebellion. The Varlek strike back." The group barely had time to celebrate. A loud alarm suddenly blared through the cavern. The warriors rushed to their stations, checking their scanners. Ethan's heart sank as he looked at the radar. The Varlek had found them. Sira clenched her fists. "They must have tracked us." Vela's eyes widened. "They're coming." Outside, the sky lit up as a massive Varlek war fleet emerged from hyperspace. The enemy ships descended fast, weapons charging up. The rebel leader turned to Ethan. "You wanted a war, human." Ethan cocked his rifle. "I always finish what I start." The final battle had begun.